Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Yellowjackets. A great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the past stuff. It's been 2 months since the season 1 finale, and the whole situation with Shauna, it's so interesting, and I like that they have that where it's like she's seeing Jackie. Understandable, she has a lot of guilt about what happened to Jackie, and that also makes sense why that kind of ended up resurfacing all those years later. We saw that present day with her seeing Jackie everywhere. So I am curious, like, had that been something that happened periodically throughout her life, maybe during more stressful moments, she'd end up seeing Jackie. But in this case, it makes sense. You're dealing with the trauma of Jackie's death, but knowing that present day wasn't the first time it's happened, that it's happened before. It's almost an interesting parallel of like Thais's circumstances of like kind of her like blacking out, going into trance state. Obviously, we learned that obviously it happened in the past, and it's kind of, I can't remember. I want to say it hasn't happened in a while, because at this point in time, the only person who knows is Van. But, you know, obviously Thaisa talked to Shauna about it, so the others might not know about it, like her. Because obviously, like, Shauna and Thaisa became, like, each other's secret bearers, because it's like, right, Thaisa was the first one to find out she was pregnant. I'm trying to remember. I don't think Shauna knows about Thaisa yet, about her kind of, like I said, I think Van's the only one that knows about her kind of blacking out and going that trance state. But either way, a fugue state probably be more apt a description. But either way, her talking to Jackie, and it's almost like a ha ha ha, we're having fun, and it's just like that cut to like her dead cold body, like that's mad disturbing. And then the conversation turns sour when it's like, okay, so how did you two like meet, like you and Jeff? And it's like, well, there's a party, and obviously you guys had like a fight for like the millionth time. It's like, oh, but do you know why we had that fight? Because it's like, apparently, like, she had said, like, oh, I don't know if I want to be with you. So that's why, like, Shauna was like, I don't, in her head, she tried to justify it, but Jackie was like, no, we had that fight because he said that he didn't know if he could be with someone, like, because they hadn't had sex yet. And she's like, I don't know if I can be with someone who's like that. And Shauna's like, I didn't know. But Jackie's like, no, you did know, because obviously this Jackie's just a manifestation of her own brain. Like her mind is attacking her. Her guilt is attacking her, because it's like, right, this version of Jackie in her mind would only know that because she herself knows it. So it's like, you did know the reasons why. And it's like, oh, did he kiss you? It's like, no, you kissed him first. And then obviously she got so upset she ended up shoving Jackie's body, and Jackie's ear fell off. And you're like, okay, wow. Jumping ahead a little bit, I think it's fascinating. It turns out Shauna's the first one that went cannibal. That's interesting. I mean, to be fair, you were starving. It was meat that was there, and it was like defrosting in your pocket. So, and it's like, it's also that, once again, the layers upon trauma there of like, yeah, your friend who you blame yourself, your best friend, you blame yourself for her death, but also like you weren't on the best of terms when she died. In fact, you were at each other's throats when she died, and now you're also eating her, which makes me go, it might be a while before not even Shauna, but maybe everyone else eventually crosses that line. Because which is such interesting timing too, because, and a little spoilerish, but, cannibalism. It's just interesting. That's something else. Sunday Night dealt with cannibalism. Something else that Melanie Linsky was involved with. She wasn't directly involved with the cannibalism aspect of the show, but just the fact that she happened to be in as just like an interesting connectivity in that regard. But yeah, not unless it's something where Shauna is, you know, slicing off a little bit of Jackie on the side, and then everyone else finds. I mean, we know everyone else eventually gets on the cannibal train, but, you know, the fact that I wasn't expecting Shauna to be the one that kind of ended up starting that off. Now you're just like, so when are they going to find out? Like I said, is she going to be slicing all bits of Jackie because like there's not enough food going around? But then everyone's like, all of a sudden you seem healthy, you seem like you're eating, what's going on, Shauna? And then are they going to ostracize her? But it must not ostracize her for long if they start going down once again the cannibal bandwagon. So I'm so curious to see when that switch is, and when that potentially comes up, you know? So, because obviously they have very few little food left. That's why Travis and Natalie are going out. I mean, first and foremost, they're still looking for Javi because he's been missing all that time. But also they're trying to expand out and find food. But it's winter, so the food situation was already pretty scarce beforehand. Now you're adding in the fact is a lot of wildlife is probably, I mean, obviously it's wintertime, so some stuff might be in hibernation like a bear, but also like you're also, a lot of stuff probably moved away from the area. But it also benefits them that Natalie and Travis are also mapping out the location. So we see that they're building a map of the general area, kind of like what was it, 6 or 7 mile radius around where they are. So, but obviously Travis is holding on to the hope that his brother's alive. But it's like, yeah, it's been 2 months. The cold conditions, like there's no way he could have like survived on his own out here, is it? But then Lottie is saying like, no, your brother's still alive, but Natalie calls her out for it, which I think is a nice juxtaposition of where their situation is present day, just because of it all, like the Lottie, Travis, and Nat of it all kind of circles back present. I love how the show does that so well. So that's so fascinating. But like I said, we'll talk about that more when we get to the present day stuff. But Lottie's kind of doing kind of a little bit of a witchcraft thing of just kind of a Wiccan thing, really. She's kind of like performing like kind of protections and like, yeah, adding her blood to like the drinks as they go out. It's like, yeah, this Wiccan stuff isn't really helping. It's like, yeah, but you manage to come back every time fine. So at the very least, even if it's having like a placebo effect, it's working to some extent. So Misty still in the doghouse with everyone, understandably so. Like everything went super sideways because of you and your mushrooms. You kind of getting everyone high so there's data of it all, and it's like, oh, you can't, definitely never let you near the food. And she's like, I'm not poisoning everyone again. And I love that it seems like she's buddying up with like, and I love that we're expanding the roster of like, yeah, here's some characters you didn't really get to know last season. It's like, oh yeah, there's these 2 girls sitting down with another girl named Crystal who's humming and stuff, and it seems like Crystal and Misty might hit it off, understandably, because like literally everyone else hates Misty's guts. So it's like, yeah, now it's like here's someone that's like, oh, like I can, everyone can sing, like maybe we can even harmonize. She's finding a friend because like, once again, she was the shit for a while because it's like, oh, my survival skills kicked in, I'm saving the day, I'm seeing a different way. But now you're just kind of like swung back around. It's like, yeah, everyone hates you now. People were just kind of about you before, and they were like, hey, we like you. Now it's back. Now it's not even like people are indifferent to you and just kind of like, you're a weirdo. It's like, no, people actively hate you now because of what you did. So, but the Crystal thing is kind of interesting. I mean, first and foremost, like I said, we're expanding out, being like, hey, let's learn some of the other characters that have been in the background, like who are now coming to the foreground. I mean, I don't know if she's someone that was legitimately a background actor, like from like the other girls that we don't really know, or most likely it's like we kept that ambiguous enough in the background, but it's like, yeah, we cast this character this season or whatever. So that's interesting. That whole situation when Lottie touched Travis's chest to like help him breathe and calm down, did she see that or did he? Well, because she's the one with the visions and stuff, so I'm assuming she saw that. But interestingly enough, like Nat and Travis end up finding that tree, and they notice like the tree around that tree, like the ice is thawed and stuff. And Nat's like, there's no snow and stuff, and it's like, that's weird. And so it's like, right, this has something to do. We know because of Lottie that it has something to do with Javi. So that's definitely going to be interesting. Obviously, the Van and Thaisa situation. Van is like literally tying Thaisa to her to make sure she doesn't go off on her own. Once again, at this point in time, Van's the only one that really knows about that. And obviously Thaisa is worried because it's like, I don't want you to have to, I might be putting you in danger. I mean, hell, like I was like, oh, are they about to have some sexy time? And it's like, no, she bit her lip. It's like, oh, sorry about that. I also love that it ended in a weirdly kind of gothic romantic way of her taking her blood and writing I heart you on her. It's like, really? This is how you're going to tell me I love you for the first time? She's like, yeah, but I don't hear nothing from you. You're kind of leaving me hanging, lady. And it's like, I love you too. It's like, oh, that's really sweet. because she was trying to tell Taissa, like, right, you don't scare me off, Taissa, which I think, once again, a neat parallel with everything that's going on present day with her, especially with her and Simone, because of what Simone discovered last episode, in the season finale, which, to be fair, has been like maybe a couple hours. But yeah, when she went to pick up Sammy, Simone was like, get the fuck away from him. And it's like, you need help. It's either drop out of the race and get some severe help, or I'm going to go to the press with this, which I was like, that's I guess it's like, right, when she did something disturbing like that, it's understandable. I think putting together all the stuff like Sammy talked about last season, and I guess it's like, piecing it all together, you're like, yeah, there's something wrong with Taissa. But I think that's an interesting juxtaposition that, like, Van is the one that's like, no, I accept you for who you are, at the same time, present day, where Simone is being like, no, get some damn help, or I'm going to go to the press about all this, which obviously Taissa hasn't even fully been in office yet. And now this is kind of jeopardizing everything on that front. So, and obviously this presents the opportunity to kind of fully bleed over into like the present day stuff, where obviously Shauna's still dealing with the aftermath of that whole Adam thing. I love that Misty's giving her an interrogation, and poor Misty, like, she's the friend that's there for everyone, but no one's there for her. She's like, oh, like, you could stay for this and that, and it's like, oh, did you murder, like, someone killed Adam? It's like, I didn't murder him, Adam, whatever. It's like, oh, who said anything about murder? It's like, you said someone killed him. And it's just, I love it. It's like, I love how disturbing Misty is. But it's like, yeah, like, Misty feels like there's still something hanging on, like, oh, we're missing something, which her instincts are right. She is, once again, she's got her little, like, detective crew thing that she's a part of, like citizen detectives and stuff. So it's like, she's got some of those instincts. She was right, because it ended up playing a role. I think her saying all that did get to Shauna, and Shauna did decide to look into it more. Like, maybe there was something I missed. Turns out Adam had an art studio, which we'll get to in a second, but that's kind of like Shauna and Jeff's side of things. But circling back to Misty, she goes on like the message boards, and they're looking into Adam's disappearance, and a certain voice popped up. His name is in the credits, so, and I'll go ahead and talk about it, because he's in, we don't know the character's name, but it's Elijah Wood's character, that's how him and Missy are going to cross paths, because that was his voice. So, and once again, he was credited in the credits because it is his voiceover, but he's the one that made the post about, I didn't get the whole bit where he was like, da-da-da-da, stop. Da-da-da-da, stop. And she's like, oh, this telegram bit. And then he was talking about the I was like, oh, I get it now. I was like, oh my God. I was like, I didn't get the stops. But before she was reading it, I was reading. I paused the TV and was reading. I was like, I don't get the stop. And then it was like, when they said it out loud, I was like, all right, telegrams, because that's how you had to do telegrams. That was how you put periods. Like, that was how you punctuated that. You were like, stop, full stop. That's what a period's supposed to represent, grammatically speaking. So I was like, okay, it makes sense. It was a fucking literary, like, a form of literary, like, bit, which is like, that's such a literary nerd thing. I think that would still fall under, like, literary stuff, like telegrams and stuff. But tangent on all that side, he kind of thinks, like, hey, maybe this is something about, like, this guy's lady friend. Like, because usually in a situation like this, you'd be kind of looking towards the person that was close to him. And Missy be like, what? No, he doesn't have any. I love that she, like, downvoted it too, because she's like, nah, he doesn't have anything concrete. And it's like, yeah, she's looking out for her friends. And the next person she's looking out for is Natalie. And I love that she showed up at, like, that guy Larry's place, and it's just like, oh yeah, let me look. She's like, you didn't do anything. He's like, oh really? Let me look again. And she sat there sitting. I was like, you're a dick, Larry. But hey, he's like, yo, my clientele is all about discretion, so, I'm not saying anything. And I love that she tried to be like, oh, this is your address? This is your social security number? I'm like, yo, Misty. But he was just so calm, cool, and collected. It's like, yeah, my clients deserve their discretion, so. But it's like, oh, Natalie paid all that money, and then she just kind of bailed at night. And poor Missy be like, no, she's my best friend. She wouldn't leave. It's like, Jesus, it's like, once again, it's heartbreaking, because you're so messed up, Misty, because it's like, you look for any type of friendship, because your, like, life is like, once again, that's why she latched on so hard to being so regarded as special and being the one everyone can rely on, because it was filling a void in her life. And now it's like, even all these years later, obviously that void is still there. And she went in being like, of course Natalie left without saying anything to me. But then she saw that, like, even though she broke into, like, the room Natalie was in, she sees that the door was locked from the inside and is like, wait, what? And then looks and sees, it's like, okay, I know what's happening. And the fact is, Larry had to have known because there are security cameras, so he knew that she didn't go willingly. He knew that she got snatched, so they must have paid him off to let that happen. Which, speaking of Natalie, she got snatched up by Lottie's cult, which we got, I did like that beginning of the episode where it's like, right, it's like, oh, who else survived? I was like, oh, it's almost like the writers wrote specifically for the fans of the show, because, like, obviously season 1, everyone was on their fan theory on their fan theory thing of, like, who survived and stuff like that. So it's a little meta of that dialogue. I'm like, no, who survived? Like, who was everyone there? And obviously one of the people they mainly focus on the people we know survived. And then also, maybe if you pause it, you'll probably get glimpses of other people, but we know for sure Lottie's alive. So it's like, yeah. And going back home, like, she already had, like, her family already thought she was weird to begin with, like, the whole, like, seeing stuff, visions and stuff. Like, we already learned last season that was kind of like a weird thing for her. They always thought something was off about their daughter, but now she's, like, walking the home, she's not sleeping, she's not eating, and ooh, that good old electric shock therapy. So, but she took a lot of what she gained out there in that wilderness and she brought it back, and she ended up kind of like, hey, I'm helping people. It's kind of saying, like, right, you can't rely on anyone but yourself. Like, yeah, things in life might make you think, like, this is on you, but she was basically, at the end of it all, none of this is real. I guess she's, like, kind of like everyday life is kind of an illusion. I don't know the full extent of where she goes in that, but you're like, oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we already saw that, the inklings of that last season, and now we're, like, really going to lean into the cult of it all. Because, I mean, I did a nerd mode on Yellowjackets, so I already knew what Lottie looked like, the actress who was going to play Lottie present day. There's some other stuff about, like, there's at least one more casting I'm aware of. One of the survivors, I know who they are. I mean, it's not fully indicative of anything because that doesn't mean anything. Because, I mean, think about Travis. Like, Travis is like, yeah, we had, like, adult Travis, but, you know, what capacity that character exists because, you know, he potentially unalived himself, which obviously Natalie doesn't believe that it's kind of a stage situation. But the point is, it was in that capacity, so who's to say this particular survivor won't be in that same capacity where it's like, maybe you get some adult stuff, but it'll be past. Like I said, I don't want to spoil it, but this is something like I came across this casting news like months ago. So, you know, but I won't talk about who it is until that particular character and the adult present day version of that character pops up in the show. Then I'll talk about who it is. But either way. What I thought was really interesting too is Natalie, obviously, like when it's Lottie's cult, like the person who came to like pull her out of bed, I was like, oh, why does she look so familiar? And then I remembered, I was like, right. If you're unaware, the actress's name, the woman who came in to look after Natalie, her name is Nicole Maines. I actually like stumbled across the information that she was going to be in this show. There's another actor who was. I'll talk about them when they pop up in the show because I don't know in what capacity they're going to pop up. But Nicole Maines, I just happened because I Googled her because I think it was because of the whole. I'm jumping around a lot bit, but she played a character called Nia Knoll, aka Dreamer, on the show Supergirl. She was actually like the first like trans superhero in the I think just in TV general and in general, maybe even I definitely know in the Arrowverse, but I want to say in general she was the first trans superhero on TV. But yeah, I looked into her because I'd never looked into her background before. I think because there was a thread on Twitter about like Arrowverse stuff, like, hey, looking back on the Arrowverse as a whole, because obviously it's coming to an end because this is the Flash's final season, and there's some story beat stuff, but also like behind the scenes stuff, yada yada, so on and so forth. And that kind of got me like thinking about her because like her name came up in the conversation at one point in time, and I was like, oh, and I looked into her story. I had never looked into her story before. Found out like obviously she has a twin brother, and just like more of her life and her like transition and stuff like that. I was like, I highly recommend it. If you've never read into her story, you should. It's a really interesting story. Like, I only read little bits and pieces of it, but when I read it, was really interesting. So, but she's roughly speaking, she's like 25. Now, that's significant only for the purposes, she's like maybe 24 to 26. I don't know when her birthday is, so I don't, but I think she's in the mid-20s range, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So, when I found that out, and I was like, oh, she's cast in a show, the fact of the matter is, it immediately made me go like, oh, could she be? And this is just me wild speculating. I'm not saying this for a fact, but knowing roughly her age in real life, and it's been 25 years in between them getting lost in them, like, present day. I was thinking, could she end up being, interestingly enough, Shauna's daughter? Because last season I was like, oh, like maybe, it's like, oh, maybe she was pregnant with Callie, but I'm like, no, Callie's a high schooler, because I corrected myself in that same review. But now it's like, because we don't know what happened to baby. Either it's implying like, hey, I mean, it's unclear, because it's like, hey, she could have lost the baby, or it could be, which obviously like her losing the baby could be a scary situation when we're dealing with cannibalism. And once again, it also depends on how far along she ends up getting and stuff like that. But you also add in, what if the baby did survive and she gave it up for adoption? It would be about the age of Nicole Main's character, if the character's playing about her age as well. I don't know. That's where my immediate thought was when I found out she was cast in the show, because she would be in that age range. But once again, that's just me spitballing. I don't know anything. That's just a theory. And it probably most likely there's a pretty good chance that's going to be false. And we'll find out maybe the baby sadly died or whatever, but that was kind of a theory I had. And I mean, and maybe that could still be applicable. Maybe it's just not her character that could end up potentially being the baby. Once again, if the baby was given up for adoption. So that's a whole thing. I mean, once again, that's also me leaning into it being like, oh, they ended up having another daughter later on with Callie, but it's like, it could have easily just been they had a son beforehand. So once again, so that just me spitballing some theories in that regard. But other than that, Natalie did manage to get herself free. I was kind of scared when she stabbed Nicole Main's character. I was like, no! I was like, wait, you're going to just kill her? I was like, oh man, that's brutal. But it's like, okay, luckily she guarded with her hand in time. It's like, because obviously this is something she's still kind of a newbie at this, because it's like she's taking care of Natalie, and Natalie's the fighter that she is. She's always been rough and tumble. So finding the opportunity, it's like, oh yeah, like, like you can let loose one of my hands. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to do anything. It's like, yeah, give her the opportunity. She could have, because she even has a mark on her face because the fork stabbed through her hand and almost went to her. Like, it's like right below her eye. It's like, that could have been worse than what it was. So that was interesting. And then obviously running into Lottie again, it's like, oh, this is my friend. And and Natalie's like, oh, is that what we are? And it's like, yeah, I got a message for him. And I'm like, it's from Travis, isn't it? Which obviously, she's going to be like, it's a message probably from the great beyond, or it's something that Travis said to her before he, quote unquote, unalived himself. Why I have to add the quotes? Because once again, Natalie was pretty sure it was murder, but we don't know for sure if he like fully did. If I remember correctly, I don't think it was ever like the police and everyone's assuming that that's the case. Because obviously this also has to deal with like the bank account and obviously Lottie's name and stuff like that. So once again, it's that very cult-ish thing that she's kind of got going on. And I think she's still doing her thing of potentially having visions and stuff. And, maybe it's a thing of it was real up to a certain point, and who's to say Lottie hasn't started faking it, getting old. Like, that could be an interesting twist to it where, yes, for a long time they were real, but maybe she's kind of built so much upon that now she has no choice but to kind of fake it going forward. Like, maybe she doesn't have those visions anymore. Once again, just kind of throwing that out there. Nothing in the show suggests that, but it's just kind of me throwing that out there. That'd be interesting if that was the case, but who knows? I didn't finish up with the Thaisa stuff, so let me finish up with that, where she ended up discovering like what Simone found, because she had ended up getting a new dog for Sammy, and now found out like, oh, what I did. And it's like, oh my god. And I love that the dog runs in and she's holding the dog, and the dog's literally staring forward and seeing all the foul shit that happened, and she's like, right, I'm gonna do better with you, I'm gonna be better with you. I was like, that's super jacked up that this dog has to see all that disturbing shit. It's like, wait, that could be me? That was my predecessor? So that's definitely going to be interesting to see how that plays out, especially with the Simone stuff, Simone aspect of it all. But other than that, circling back finally, because I went off track with them, I brought them up earlier, was the whole Jeff and Shauna of it all, which Shauna, once again, catching so much flack from Callie, because Callie's like, no, like, you're going to act like everything's normal. It's like, right, your boyfriend and everything, he ends up going missing. Like, obviously, like, something had to have happened to him, and you're just so blasé about it. Like, the timing, it's like, yeah, what if Dad found out? Like, you didn't tell Dad, or, no, I told your dad. It's like, wait, you did? It's like, yeah. How could you? Shauna's on, like, what? You were just getting on me about not telling him. It's like, you selfish, you're so fucking selfish. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? You suck. First you're complaining that your mom didn't tell your dad. Now she's like, no, I actually told your dad. He knows. And it's like, how could you, you selfish person? I'm like, it's nothing Shauna can do is ever good enough for this kid. You're like, I'm like, right, to be fair, your mom is kind of fucked up. It's a very fucked up situation you find yourself surrounded in. I get it, but I'm also super biased because it's Melanie Lynskey and I adore Melanie Lynskey. So I'm also like, cause especially like her as Shauna, and that's why I was so excited when she was in The Last of Us, but I'm also like, cut Shauna, Melanie Lynskey, some slack. You know, she doesn't deserve your shit, kid. You know, that's why I'm also like, I'm super biased about it. So I'm like, don't you talk smack to Melanie Lynskey. You show her some goddamn respect, you know, so that's why, once again, I'm super biased in that regard, but also it's like, yeah, you're a teenager, you're angsty, but also there is some foul shit going on around you, so I'm also going to cut you some slack in that regard. But yeah, because of what Misty brought up, it made Shauna decide, like, okay, I'll look into this whole situation. So she found that art studio key. They went to check out, and you can tell it was kind of like especially for Jeff, he's like, yo, I'm on fire at work. Oh, art studio. Have you ever been there? She's like, no, never. Well, what's there? It's like, I honestly have no idea. So they go in, and obviously he's got a lot of stuff of Shauna. It's like, oh, did you pose for him? And it's like, no. And it's like, okay. So, and then it's like, okay. And then Shauna just kind of out of nowhere being like, I kind of got turned on about the thought of you being with someone else. I was like, hey, yo. And she's like, yeah, like the thought of someone's like tongue in your mouth and you smelling like them, like it turned me on. But she's also like, I'm not going to be ashamed of me being who I am, like, anymore. And then they like do it in Adam's studio. And at first I was like, afterward, because like we cut away and I'm like, oh, did he not, like, you know, rise to the occasion? I mean, we get extra bits later on, so I'm like, it seems like he did, but it's also kind of disturbing of like, yeah, the guy you were having an affair with, we're banging in his loft after, like, you know, the same guy you've also murdered, and I helped you cover up the whole, I played my part in kind of helping you cover all that up, you know, so a lot of complex feelings in that moment, especially considering you're doing it in front of art he made of your wife. It's like, it's all kinds of jacked up. And obviously, like, this is all kind of taking a toll on Jeff to the point that he was listening to it. At first, I was like, I know that song. I didn't know where it was. I had to look it up and Google it. It's Papa Roach. I was like, oh, man. I've only heard bits and pieces of Papa Roach. I've never, but I was like, yeah, I was like, the cut my life into pieces. I was like, that song sounds familiar. I was like, so look, I Googled it. It's a Papa Roach song. But yeah, like, Jeff was kind of like, you know, it's just like he was kind of working out his frustration, just, you know, and even later on, Sean was like, why are you sweating? He's like, no, don't worry about it. It's like, okay. Because she's trying to gauge, like, okay, are we good? Are we okay? Because they destroyed the paintings by, like, mangling the faces on the painting so that no one would be able to tell it's her. So he won't directly connect her to Adam, in case they ever come looking. But they also gather up all his stuff and they end up burning it on the grill. But it's like, yeah, let's pretend like we made all this stuff like while we're grilling in November, and then like they're eating and trying to pretend like everything's normal, and Callie can smell the BS, and it's like, what's going on here? She's like, fine, I'm gonna go grill me a burger, and it's like, oh, go ahead, honey. And then Shauna was like, no, and then Jeff was like, oh, no, right, honey, let me do that. Which obviously later on she's very suspicious and she looks into it, and it's like, cool, she finds a I.D., so it's like, what is she gonna do? I I have no, which once again, it's sad because like her and Shauna were actually in a better place upon like when she found out about the Adam of it all. It's like, yeah, like her and Shauna actually were going to be in a better place. And now that's kind of going downhill subsequently, since it's just like that relationship and dynamic's been kind of a roller coaster. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how that family, like that whole family dynamic plays out with Callie now being suspicious, because it's like, right, because it's like, right, dad was grilling, so dad had to have known about, so he's a part of this as well. Now you're thinking probably like both my parents had something to do with this guy's disappearance. Like, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to rat out on your parents and bring this to the police's attention? If so, geez, you're going to suck a lot more. But I'm like, maybe she just, I mean, it's that thing of like, right, if your parents done something wrong, I'm not saying this should be applicable in real life. If you find out like, hey, your parent did something super doobie, like something sinister like that, or you suspect them to be a part of something, like, you have every right to like go to the police. But for the context of the show, in this fictional story, I'm like, do not rat out on, don't you dare betray Melanie Linsky. Don't you, rat on your parents. Don't do that. You suck big time if you do that. But it's like, I don't know. I'm curious to see what she ends up doing now with all of that, you know? So, hell of a way to start the season. Obviously, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where everything ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.